Yo, what is up guys, Randy here. Today we're going to be talking about depth of field and how you can better understand it to start controlling it in your images. So let's just get into it. Alright guys, so your depth of field is controlled by two different elements, and that's going to be your aperture and your focal length of your lens. And I figured let's just talk about the aperture first real quick. So if you're kind of experienced in photography, you'll know that your f-stops are how big or how small your aperture opening is. So if you have an f2, your aperture opening is going to be really big. If you have an f22, it's going to be really small. Now, the bigger the opening is, the smaller your focus plane is going to be, so the more shallow depth of field you're going to get, and vice versa. The smaller the hole, the bigger focus you're going to get, and the more depth of field you're going to get. So understanding this is kind of essential, because while you're looking at me this way and I can explain it like this, you really want to imagine it like this. So depending on what f-stop you're shooting at depends on how wide your focus is going to be, or your focus plane is going to be. So if you wanted to get, say, a shallow focus plane just to get someone's eye, or if you're shooting portraits or something and you just want them in focus, what you would want to do is you would want to set your aperture opening to be big, or a small f-stop number, and that would shrink your focus plane so that only this much of reality is going to be in focus. Now, that's the first thing that controls it. The next thing that's going to control it is actually going to be your focal length. So with your focal length, there's really just one thing to keep in mind, is the more telephoto you get, so the more zoomed in you get, the smaller it also shrinks, and the wider you get, the wider your focus plane is. So if you're shooting at f24, you're going to have a much wider focus plane, even if you're shooting at, say, f2. So while the f2 controls a certain part, the focal length will also control another part. So if you wanted to get extremely shallow depth of field, you would want to shoot at like 135 millimeters and then at f2. So that would shrink your focus plane to just this tiny amount. So those two elements, your aperture and your focal length, will control your depth of field. So the more wide open you shoot, the smaller focus plane you're going to have, and then the more telephoto your lens is, the smaller it's going to be, and vice versa. The more wide angle you are, the more wide focus plane you're going to have, and then the more close down your aperture, also the wider your focus plane is going to get. And you're going to see that with, say, landscapes, people shoot f11, f16, and that's because they want to get a wide focus plane, and then they also shoot a lot of wide angle lenses, and that's for the same reason. That way you can get your foreground and your background both in focus to kind of keep the landscape all in focus. And with portrait work, you see people typically shooting 50 millimeter, 85 millimeters, a very popular one, and an 85 millimeter, say 1.4. That's because they want to get as big of an aperture opening and have a telephoto lens to get an even smaller focus plane, so that you can get, say, the eye in focus, and even just like the skin will start to fall off a tiny bit just to give you a little bit more of that smooth effect. So that's depth of field, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Hit that like button, subscribe. See you next time.